on the big screen.
Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing the Simpsons movie, originally released back in 2007, so it's 15 years old now, which is crazy. I remember seeing this movie in theaters. I was in high school at the time, and rewatching this now, it just reminded me of seeing it in theaters and all of the moments that got the biggest laughs in the theater. And as I recall, it was a packed theater, and I want to say it was like mostly 20 somethings, mostly people in college. And it was a great crowd, and it was just like full of love and laughter for The Simpsons. And myself, I never really got into The Simpsons. I actually have just recently now started to watch it, and I've only seen like the first handful of episodes. And to my knowledge, it's to my understanding that the golden age of The Simpsons is considered to be more or less seasons 3 through 8. Which is interesting because, obviously it is the longest running animated series. It's the longest running a few things. Let's see, it's longest running animated series, longest running American sitcom, and longest running American scripted primetime television series. My goodness. It originally premiered back in 1989, and, it originally started with the Tracy Ullman show as shorts from that before it became its own series. And obviously, though, it's a staple in American pop culture, in television, in media around the world. People know who Homer Simpson is, who Marge is, who Bart is, Lisa, Maggie, all the whole Simpson family. And I remember as a kid, like my first thing I ever saw of The Simpsons was, I don't know what episode it was, but this was in maybe mid to late 90s. So during like the peak of The Simpsons, when Bart says like something about like pointing out basically that how they have 4 fingers, like making fun of that. He's like, oh God, that's weird. And like he puts his hand against like seeing the 5-fingered hand, and he just puts his hand over it. That's like my memory of it as a kid, and I found it so odd. Like, I didn't understand meta humor as a kid, so that's funny. But I've seen I've seen only a handful of episodes of the series, so the whole reason I wanted to see the movie, I remember the marketing of it, I remember it being such a big deal, and the reason I went to see it was because I was excited by the whole Spider Pig scene. I distinctly remember it being promoted so much in the trailers, just Marge looking up and saying, how did the pig tracks get on the ceiling? And then Homer singing, Spider Pig does whatever a Spider Pig does. Can he swing from a web? No, he can't. He's a pig. And that, for whatever reason, was so hilarious to me. Obviously, just, making fun of Spider-Man and everything. It's not even necessarily like an original joke. Like, it's a super obvious thing, but it's so dumb and catchy, obviously. And even though, again, it's not like, their own thing that they made up. And I remember in the movie theater, everyone singing along to it in that moment. So this, for me, honestly, was another one of my favorite movie-going experiences. I'm realizing, just rewatching this and remembering in the theater how many people were, like, all the moments people were laughing so hard, and that just made it so much more enjoyable in this packed theater of Simpsons fans. And so obviously with this movie, like, you don't have to be a fan of the series in order to be a fan of this movie. And with the series, I've seen, like, obviously the show is considered to be well past its prime, and clearly it seems that they're going for quantity over quality now. Like, I'm sure most people agree it should have ended probably like 10, 20 years ago even, which that's kind of sad to think. But I mean, you look at, say, another one of Matt Groening's shows, Futurama, which is now going to be revived for the 3rd time. It went from like late 90s to early 2000s before it was canceled. Then it was revived on Comedy Central. I was about to say Cartoon Network, Comedy Central, and then now it's going to be on Hulu. And I've seen only a few episodes of that show too, and I've been meaning to check out that show fully too. It's just like there's so much stuff out there, so it's hard to like keep up with everything of new stuff, let alone the endless library of old things that there are, So, and I know first world problems, like complaining about that there's too many shows to watch, my God. But just like as a writer myself, wanting to, kind of experience all of these shows that are staples in pop culture, and especially with The Simpsons, how The Simpsons defined so many other animated shows. A big one being, of course, Family Guy, that they always make fun of that. Like within Family Guy, they've made fun of how much they rip off The Simpsons and everything. But like you look at any long running adult animated series and they have The Simpsons to thank for it. Like Bob's Burgers, of course, being one of my favorites, which just recently had a movie. And now it's available also, like it's on streaming now, so which is great. And this so just rewatching this, like again, like what mostly stood out was just remembering all the moments that people laughed out loud throughout. For instance, like Homer flipping off the crowd while he's in the sinkhole and then he gets stuck. Like that's so ridiculous. That whole mob scene obviously is great with the animation. The whole sequence of Bart riding on the skateboard and then covering his doodle, as he says, only for them to show it then blatantly. And I remember like on cable, like when this movie's on cable years ago, and then like they would censor it saying like European version only or something. That's so funny. But on Disney Plus they show it, so there you go. They don't censor it. It's funny also like having Green Day in the beginning, like even like the whole meta humor of Homer making fun of like everyone seeing this movie. Like why would we pay to watch something in theaters when we could see for free on TV? If you ask me, everyone here in this theater is a big sucker, especially you. Like that got a big laugh. And then the Simpsons Movie on the big screen. And of course the theme song is iconic, composed by Danny Elfman. The music is great. And The Simpsons is so vastly huge. And then the movie, though, I'm sure Simpsons fans would agree is not like necessarily the best version of The Simpsons, because even back then people considered it to be past its prime, because when this movie came out back in 2007 there were already, I looked it up, there were already 400 episodes of The Simpsons at the time, and now there are well over 700. And so it seems like they're probably going to go for 1,000 episodes, like, because there's currently 33 seasons and 728 episodes as of the recording of this podcast. So I wonder, like, realistically when the series is going to end, because people have speculated, like, oh, maybe this show will end when one of the main voice actors passes away. But then people say, well, no, I'm sure they could just like easily replace them, sadly, and just keep it going. And so that's kind of sad to think. And like even all these other long running shows with Family Guy and Bob's Burgers, though Bob's Burgers is not as much, like not yet, compared to these other shows that have been going on since the late 90s. And this one, of course, being the longest since 1989. But I mean, like South Park 2, for instance, is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, which is crazy too. My God, how time flies. But I'm sure Bob's Burgers will be well on its way too, because it's already had, it's been on the air for over 11 years now. So it's like weird to think like when eventually these shows will end. Even American Dad, which actually originally was on Fox, then it was canceled like several years ago now, and then before it went to TBS, picked it up then. That was like back in 2014 or something. So all of these shows, and then even also like King of the Hill, but that ended, that supposedly might be coming back too. So all of these shows, because of the Simpsons, like Simpsons is like, the first obviously of being really an adult animated sitcom. I mean, not the first, I shouldn't say that, but in terms of it reaching the next level in the zeitgeist and everything, because of course you got the Flintstones really before that, which was back in the 60s. So talking about like its legacy in that sense is what is really cool. But I think like with the show itself, I'm probably just gonna like, instead of like trying to watch through the whole thing, like I wouldn't do that to like watch through the whole thing, probably just even like not even like all of the episodes, obviously, because like it's just like that seems like a daunting task, and also seems kind of after a certain point it's like kind of the show goes downhill supposedly, so it doesn't seem like worth it to do all that. But I've seen a couple of episodes I consider like some of the greats, and one of them is Bart Gets an F, which I do recommend that episode if you haven't really seen the show, or it is like one of those episodes considered one of like a great episode, like one of those like landmark standout episodes, because like it really got to me at the end when he was crying, because like he really tried this time and he still failed, and then like the teacher bumped up his grade and he just showed some applied knowledge. It was very cute, like you really felt it for him in that moment, so that's great. And like, it was just very, like, it made me tear up actually. And obviously Bart Simpson, I think so far from what I've seen of The Simpsons, I guess Bart is my favorite character. I'm saying that so like hesitantly because I feel like I don't have, like, I've seen enough of The Simpsons to know of The Simpsons, obviously, but, and even with the movie too, you don't have to have watched the show, of course, obviously. But because like from what I've seen, like, he's a troublemaker, but then he has hearts to him. There's like another episode I saw actually for a class I took last year because the teacher was a writer for The Simpsons, Brent Forrester, who also wrote for The Office. And one of the episodes he showed clips from was just like the B story of Bart's like selling his soul, and then Lisa gets it back for him, and like they have a cute little like heart to heart moment, Lisa and Bart. So I like their dynamic, and Lisa's another one of my favorite characters, I think, because I kind of just feel for Lisa. Like, she's not necessarily the funniest character in the family, but she's obviously the most sensible, the voice of reason, and she has to like work the hardest. She's like the classic middle child syndrome of kind of like, looked past and everything, because of course you got Bart the troublemaker, so all the boys obviously look up to him, as in like fans of the show. I'm sure like little kids are always like, oh, I want to be like Bart, like just a trickster and everything. But then Lisa being this sensible, really smart, and just like ahead of her time, and like trying to get people to listen to her, even in the movie itself, obviously, when she's like going door to door. Even that woman who's like, oh, the girl who saved my cat, and just slams the door in her face when she tries to talk about the lake and like pollution. It's like everything falling on deaf ears. And then of course she meets that kid Colin. As far as, I don't know if he's in the show, I'm gonna just go on a limb and say no, but I don't know. So, but I know of course there's Milhouse too, who, I don't know, is he Bart's classmate? I don't even know. See, I don't know too much about The Simpsons. Apologies if I just sound like, I don't know what I'm talking about. But I know there's like so many characters. That's the thing. Like, there's so many. There must be like, I wonder how many characters realistically, like recurring characters, I should say, because, there's so many. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna like start listing even in the movie though. But also with this show, how there's so many, like a lot of the things I know about from the series are things that are just kind of memes, obviously, and like viral moments from the internet. Like a big one is that whole steamed hams scene that they make fun of, and like there's so many versions of that on the internet making fun of it. Like, it's just kind of crazy. Like, just the scene itself, like the whole sequence itself, how it's making fun of like going above and beyond for the boss, and like just hiding things, and like being so ridiculous, like steamed hams, hamburgers, and so dumb. Like, that's so funny. But also like also sentimental moments, like a big one being, I don't know what episode it is, but when Homer like covers up all the stuff saying do it for her, like for Maggie, like why he's still at the job, I guess at the nuclear power plant, And then of course, Marge Simpson, his wife, how in this movie, like, she's struggling with why is she still with Homer, and like that moment when she says, well, that's the thing, I don't have an answer now in this moment, and then she says, to prove to myself that it's really over, I taped over our wedding video, goodbye homie. And then you see like the old wedding video of them young and in love, and her saying I love you, and that moment made me tear up now watching it. It's like very sentimental, really tugs at your heartstrings. It's very sad because he's losing everything in that moment, Homer, and poor Marge having stood by him all this time, and for him to still be selfish, because that's the whole thing, he's just a selfish moron. And I see so much obviously how he's modeled after, like Peter Griffin is modeled after him, like like the idiot husband, and like it's so dumb, and like a drunk, and oh gosh, all these things. And obviously like there's so many catchphrases, with dough being a big one, and in this one when he's like dome, gosh, ridiculous. But so like that's all iconic now. I think dough then became a word in the U.S. dictionary, like the Oxford Dictionary, because of The Simpsons. That's crazy. And apparently it's just like meant to be like an exasperated sound that wasn't originally like it just became that then. So like all of these, now iconic lines and everything, and even Bart, like eat my shorts, like all like these catchphrases, and like that guy pointing, ha 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 ha. I don't know his name. I don't know his name offhand. Apologies, but And then of course Flanders, who in this movie Bart like wants him to be his dad, and Flanders to me kind of reminds me of Ted Lasso. I hate to say, but obviously Flanders also, that's where Ned Flanders, that's where Flanderization comes from. The term came from, because with the character himself, how apparently he started like more religious, but not like that being his whole identity, and then that has now become his whole identity, more or less. That's like, so basically that's what Flanderization is, obviously, where it's like one character trait becomes their whole personality just for the sake of like pushing the comedy, and like that's when shows kind of jump the shark then. Like another good example is Joey from Friends. How he started off just kind of like this a little bit dumb pretty boy, but not that dumb, to then just this total moron. And people always point to like the French episode when he can't speak French. He's just saying all these really dumb phrases that make no sense. So basically how like The Simpsons has this influence on so much of TV moving forward, like past from when they started to now, still going and going with no end in sight, really. So it's kind of going to be crazy when eventually it does end. I would think realistically it would end within the next 10 years, but who knows? Because even like Family Guy has no end in sight. Even like, it's just like weird to think. South Park too. South Park, they said they're going to keep going until they get canceled though. So, and they're still going strong. That's a rare thing though, because Matt and Trey are still running the writers room, and still like Trey writes and directs every single episode. That's not the case with most shows. Most shows they hand it off then to a different showrunner. This one too, of course, with it was Matt Groening, obviously the creator of the series, but then now I'm pretty sure it's Al Jean. It's been like him for over 20 years or something like that. So other shows too, like even Family Guy too, because then they go off to do other projects. So that's when like a show takes a new turn, and like they bring on new writers, obviously, because it's hard after years and years of how do you keep making stories for the same characters over and over, like so obviously the show isn't going to be what it once was, of course. So that is really insane to think how this show is just so still going, and it's just like one of those things. It's like, it's The Simpsons, it's the longest running series. We're going to see how many we can. I guess they're probably going for 1,000, and then maybe beyond that. It's really crazy, my goodness. But and so whatever with the movie itself, obviously with Spider Pig, and then he later calls him Harry Plopper. He's so cute, that little pig though, my goodness. And that's too bad they don't keep the pig, as far as I know, like in the show. Like they don't have the pig moving forward in the series. That would have been cute to have another pet for them, because I know they have Santa's little helper, the doggy, who is in, like, he's basically becomes part of the family in the pilot, even though that wasn't meant to be the pilot. I do know that too, that originally that was going to be like a Christmas special for the show, but it ends up being the first episode aired, because like the original pilot had animation problems or something, so it had to be pushed back until the final episode of season 1. I do know random stuff, like random facts about this show here and there. Also with this movie, there's just so many great gags, and like a great one is when the people, like the churchgoers, run out of the church, and the bar patrons run out, and then they just scream and like trade places. Like the bar people run into the church, and the church people run into the bar when they see the dome, covering Springfield. And obviously the whole thing with the dome, it's like a great metaphor for quarantining, as we went through back in 2020. That like feels like forever ago, and yet it also feels like not that. Obviously it was 2 years ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago. It's just, time is weird. I feel like I'm really babbling, and I hope I'm making sense. I feel like I'm not coherent right now, because this is another one of my late night records, so apologies. I feel like I'm just, rambling about nonsense. I'm trying to tie it back to the movie, though. Because I don't want to sit and recap the plot, because that's just kind of pointless. But I do love that Green Day are in this movie, and like they're just trying to talk about the environment for a moment, and like, oh, preachy, throwing things, and I forgot that they die in the universe of The Simpsons. So Green Day they're all gone. It's so sad. And the woman playing the funeral version of American Idiot, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh. And basically that was just Homer having to realize his own selfishness, and like how he's the one that destroyed Springfield because he put the silo into the lake. Disgusting. Oh my god. Well, I helped. Like, it's like he filled that whole thing in 2 days. Well, I helped. That got a big laugh. I remember that. Maggie is also so cute, because like the whole thing with the quicksand when she's like out of the dome and everything. Maggie's adorable, and I know she says like at the end, sequel. I think they said her first word is like daddy in the show. I don't know. But because she's like so cute, because she's just like, she's a baby but she's sentient. She seems to be like kind of one step ahead of everyone, like really know what's going on and like really knowing how to handle any situation for being like a literal 1 year old, you know. So she's really cute, always like sucking on her binky. And like even when then she saves Homer, really, and then he's like, oh Maggie, what a great little accident you turned out to be. That definitely got a big laugh too. That's so funny, oh my god. And the great Tom Hanks, that's a great cameo in this movie, so silly. But really Marge with the emotion, that's like really sad, but then it's sweet then when they reunite, and then when they kiss, and then like, you know, call back to when like after Bart is humiliated, and then he's like, this is the worst day of my life, and Homer says, worst day of your life so far. And then when at the end of the movie, when Marge and Homer reunite and they kiss, and then Marge says, best kiss of my life, and he says, best kiss of your life so far. That's really cute, that's very sweet. And you know, this show of course has won, I wonder how many Emmys it has won. Does it say it on here? Oh, it's won 34 Primetime Emmys, 34 Annie Awards, and 2 Peabody Awards. Wow, that's really cool. It's crazy to think how huge this series is, and then yet now it's sad that it's past its prime, and yet it's still going though, so whatever. People still watch it, I guess, is my point, you know? So whatever. But in terms of this movie and my favorite moments, I'm trying to think of like other moments besides like the random moments I've pointed out of people that got like big laughs in the theater that I recall. I'm trying to remember now. Oh my god, like I just watched it. Like I'm trying to remember. You know, also what stood out to me was actually it's relatively short, but like there's so much packed into it, and it's well paced and everything, and it's love the animation too. Like even like when they go to Alaska, and it's like, oh, my poster, and then like they're really in Alaska now, and he's trying to, you know, take it down from the window only to realize that they're in Alaska. And it's so funny when he's like, oh, we're staying in Alaska, we're never going back to America again. So ridiculous, my goodness. And when Bart causes the avalanche, and he's like, Lisa, clap for Alaska. Like, so dumb, oh my gosh. And the whole sequence then when the animals are helping, I almost said Bob. What are their names? Oh my god. Oh boy, my brain right now. This is what happens. Ugh, shouldn't be recording, but I am. Homer and Marge, like the animals are helping them, and then they go to bed, and then the animals all like they're horrified. Like they go from happy to horrified. Like, oh god, the poor animals now have been corrupted. That's so funny. Lisa's little love story is very cute though. Like, oh my gosh, like with Colin, that's very cute. And again, like Lisa and Homer, oh my gosh, Lisa and Bart, I like their dynamic too. Like when they're just like when they all pass out them from like that stuff when they're in the EPA van, and then, or whatever it is, and then like they're kicking each other still. Or then like when she has that romantic moment with Colin, she's like, oh, so it's the perfect moment. And then Bart's like, Lisa has a boyfriend that she'll never see again. She punches him in the face. My god. So she can stand up for herself. I mean, I know in the show there's that iconic "You are Lisa Simpson," so that's very sweet too. So Lisa's a great character. And Marge is great too, though, because she's so sweet, and it's like sweet her relationship with Homer, even though he's such a moron. My goodness, but I'm glad he, you know, comes through for them ultimately. The whole thing with the bomb then and everything. My goodness, like throwing the bomb out of the dome, and then it explodes, and then they're all safe, thankfully, and the dome crumbles down, and. To my knowledge also, I think there was some sort of sequel in the works, or that it had been planned, but then it was pushed back because of the pandemic, and then who knows if eventually they'll do a sequel for, like, do another Simpsons movie. Because they don't necessarily need to, obviously. There's so much with The Simpsons between the show and video games and, like, you know, millions of things of it being so huge. Family Guy still has yet to have a feature movie, and eventually maybe it will. I don't know, because it seems like it should have. It feels like it should have by now. Even South Park too. I would love to have like another South Park feature, because it's had a lot of specials lately, which are fantastic though on Paramount Plus. But my gosh, like the latest being the streaming wars, making fun of all of that. But God, I love South Park. My goodness, not to deviate, because actually in South Park there's a fantastic episode, Cartoon Wars Parts 1 and 2, which features a Bart Simpson's character, which is great too, my goodness. And I know in The Simpsons too, they did an episode, well, like a little cameo of South Park too, which is cute. They did a whole thing, like, I think, like with all the couch gags and stuff like that with the theme song. They did one of all these clones of Homer, and then, like, you see Peter Griffin as one of the clones. That's too funny. I can't help but compare because I grew up watching Family Guy, so I see so much, like, oh my god, like, Peter Griffin is like Homer Simpson, a lesser version of Homer Simpson. Obviously, Homer Simpson is the OG in terms of ridiculous, selfish moron, yet trying his best dad, an idiot, but a hilarious character, obviously. So, goodness. So, it's a fun movie, obviously, with it being such an iconic series, The Simpsons, and lots of great characters with Milhouse and Moe and the comic book guy. I don't know if he's the one that said that line that everyone loves too, like, oh boy, I hope that person really got, no, that, boy, I hope whoever did, oh my god, I'm butchering it, whatever it is, like, boy, I hope someone got fired for that blunder. That's what it is, my god. Oh boy. There was also, now I'm thinking about Family Guy, pardon me again, but there was also a few years ago, or I think it was like back in 2014, so several years ago now, there was the Simpsons guy. Like, they did a crossover with the Simpsons and Family Guy. It was technically a Family Guy episode, and they just had them meet, and it was just Homer and Peter Griffin at one point doing a sexy car wash with their guts hanging out, like, oh gosh, and Marge and Lois hanging out, and Stewie trying to be like Bart Simpson, and Lisa trying to help out Meg, and Brian losing Santa's little helper, like all that stuff, So I definitely plan on watching, like, what are considered the best episodes of The Simpsons, like the fan favorites, because The Simpsons have had such a huge influence on animation, and like the best written episodes obviously are considered to be like the ones from the 90s, really, more or less, so they're definitely worth checking out, I think. And it's amazing, like, the level of popularity the show has reached, because now it's like we take it for granted because it's been on the air so long, that's the thing, but that's really amazing how it's still going strong. Like, who would have ever predicted that? Like, these yellow, like, that's what makes them stand out, obviously, just these yellow characters, Marge with her huge blue hair, her tall blue hair, and all this stuff, how, and Bart with his spiky hair, and Lisa. It's just so funny how, who would have thunk that they'd be so vastly huge, considered to be one of the greatest, American sitcoms in history. So that is amazing. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Be sure to visit storytellingsaga.com, and as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next episode, in honor of the Season 2 premiere, I will finally be discussing Hell of a Boss. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.